There has been 2 consecutive severe down days for the US stock market. $5.4 trillion has been wiped out over the past 2 trading days, triggered by fear over Trump's tariff policy and concerns of foreign retaliation measures impacting investor sentiment. China become the first major economy to issue counter tariff. Nasdaq 100 has entered bear market territory. A bear market territory is defined by a decline of over 20% from the peak. So far, the Nasdaq 100 is down nearly 22% from its peak. JP Morgan is now expecting US to fall into a recession. Its US chief economist forecasts unemployment rate to hit 5.3% by year-end 2025 from the current 4.2% level, and the inflation is expected to rise to 4.4% by year-end, up from current 2.8%. On Friday, Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell warned Trump's tariff policy may cause higher inflation and slower economic growth.
The Smoot-Hawley tariff, I think this is the biggest policy mistake in 95 years.
Wharton professor Jeremy Siegel called Trump's tariff policy to be the biggest mistake in 95 years, citing the Tariff Act of 1930 during the Great Depression under President Hoover as a catastrophic example. I personally kind of disagree with his opinion because in 1930s, the Tariff Act came after the market crash, so the tariff policy could be part of the recovery effort. It's not the cause of the market crash because it happened after. And the world order back then were vastly different. Back then, British pounds was the reserve currency. Today, US dollar is the reserve currency. And back then, there was no modern monetary tools like quantitative easing that was invented by Japan. And the past monetary policies were very limited. And today's policy tools are far more powerful. It's like comparing pistol to nukes. This chart shows you the stock market performance since the start of Trump's second term until April 4th, comparing 4 countries. There's China, Germany, UK, Canada, Japan, and US. US is the worst performer out of the 6. China is the strongest performer with a 3% gain. During the period, the rest of the countries are negative. So the market currently may be viewing China as a beneficiary of Trump's tariff action so far. For example, on April 2nd, Trump imposed a 46% tariff on Vietnam. It's higher than the 34% tariff on China. The White House on the same day also released a formula saying they're using trade balances to come up with a tariff number, which is completely false because US to China trade deficit is the largest in the world. US-Vietnam trade deficit is nothing in comparison to US to China deficit. And Vietnam is an emerging manufacturing competitor of China. So when Trump is adding tariff to Vietnam, it's helping China. And that's where all that concerns are coming from. You're hurting China's competitor. But maybe it's not the same as it seems. Yes, some countries are retaliating very quickly, very strongly, like China. But there's also many countries start to show signs of concession. And also there's many countries just waiting on the sideline, observing to see what happens before they make a decision. Vietnamese leader quickly called Trump, offering to cut import tariff on US goods to 0%. Aim to ease the reciprocal tariff on Vietnam. Cambodian leader also sent a letter proposing to cut US tariff down to 5%. Right? So as we can see, several countries are beginning to make tariff concessions, at least concessions proposals. This is actually Trump's negotiation tactic. He inflicts pressure and discomfort to gain leverage. Right? He usually applies pressure before or during the negotiation. For example, during his first term, we can tell from his body language whenever he shakes people's hand, he likes to yank on them, or maybe he's squeezing their hands. Who knows, right? So in the Ukrainian peace talk, he was pressuring both Zelensky and Putin. It was working on Zelensky. It's not working too well on Putin because Putin have a higher pain threshold. But now, looking at the reciprocal tariff situation, he's using the same strategy. He first caused pain to all the foreign countries. Once the foreign leaders react to the pain, Trump gains leverage and begins the negotiation. This is a very consistent pattern of his negotiation style. And if in the future more countries are showing concession, U.S. will gain leverage and negotiate favorable terms, which could boost investors' confidence because the headlines will be very positive. Because today's market sentiment is extremely negative after China retaliated. China is the world superpower. There's three superpowers: U.S., European Union, China. Right? China retaliated. It's a climax of negativity right now. So it actually leaves room for market rebounding in the future. Secretary of State Mark Rubio was asked about the current market sell-off. This is what he said.
No, their economies are not crashing. Their markets are reacting to a dramatic change in the global order in terms of trade. And so what happens is pretty straightforward. If you're a company and you make a bunch of your products in China, and all of a sudden shareholders or people that play the stock market realize that it's going to cost a lot more to produce in China, your stock is going to go down. But ultimately, the markets, as long as they know what the rules are going to be moving forward, and as long as that's set and you can sustain where you're going to be, the markets will adjust. Businesses around the world, including in trade and global trade, they just need to know what the rules are. Once they know what the rules are, they will adjust to those rules.
So what he's saying is that water follows the path of least resistance. If the policy blocks the existing channel, water will flow around the block, right, to form new channels. For example, some company rely on China to manufacture stuff like Apple. If you block that, it's going to find another country of least resistance. Could be Vietnam, who knows. So he's saying adjustments will be made by its businesses. Policymakers just need to focus on making the policy. You make the rule of the game, you make it clear, and the business will figure out a way to work around them. And eventually things will adjust and stabilize. Now, in terms of negotiation between China and US, so far China's response to Trump's pressure tactics seems very tough and very quick, right? But Ray Dalio suggested possible directions for US-China trade talks. Ray Dalio often appears as a pro-China person, right? During his interviews, and especially he travels to China a lot to meet the Chinese policymakers. But on a recent post on X, actually yesterday, he suggested that China could let the yuan, or RMB, its local currency, to appreciate as a concession. This actually reminded me of Plaza Accord, where U.S. pressured Japan and other allies to appreciate their local currency against U.S. dollar to boost the U.S. export. Because when U.S. dollar appears to be cheaper, let's say Japan, U.S. is easy to sell stuff to Japan. And Japan is hard. It's harder for Japan to sell stuff to U.S. because Japanese yen become expensive. So if you look at the result of Plaza Accord, right? Japan, after that event, later invented QE, quantitative easing, and lots of expansionary monetary policy, which led to major asset bubble and crash and in 1990s, and resulting in a lost decade. So quantitative easing doesn't work well if you don't have the reserve currency, world reserve currency. But before the Plaza Accord, Japan was world's number 2 GDP. 32 out of the top 50 global firms are Japanese. 32 out of top 50. But by 2018, only one Japanese firm is left in top 50. That's Toyota. So back then, Japan agreed on this Plaza Accord due to the alliance with US. But today, China is not like that. China is not going to bend over because it's a rival or competitor of US. But looking at this post, right, Ray Dalio's yuan appreciation or RMB appreciation suggestion seems like it raises the question about his true stance. Is he actually pro-China, or is this just a cover-up? Thank you very much. Please like and subscribe.